Hi, I'm Chris Purser, and in this video, we're going to look at developing this groove. Now, this is a groove we've heard hundreds of times. It's a groove we learned very early on in the stage of our development. We hear it in countless songs all over the place. So in this video, we're going to look at 5 examples of how we can make that groove sound even cooler. We're going to start developing it and how we can use it in multiple different ways, different styles, different tempos, just by simple additions like adding notes, dynamics, hi-hat lifts, feel, and of course tempo. So let's look at the original idea, and then we're going to start building on these 5 examples. Okay, so the original idea you can see here in the notation. Pretty simple. A groove we've heard countless times, like we said before. We've just heard it being played. So we're having this bass drum on the first hi-hat, then a hi-hat on its own. That's beat 1. So we're thinking of that as 1 and then we have a snare drum and hi-hat together, hi-hat on its own, and a snare drum on its own. And then beat 3 would be a hi-hat, snare drum, hi-hat and bass drum together. And then finally in beat 4, we have a snare drum and hi-hat together, and then a hi-hat on its own. We would count this whole bar phrase like so: 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and. Okay? 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and. Okay, so you can see instantly we have added 1 bass drum at the start on beat 1. So beat 1 now has 2 bass drums. We think of that, still counting exactly the same, but the first and second hi-hat of the whole bar will now have bass drums. What we'll also see in this is brackets around our notes. That's going to mean ghost notes. Ghost notes meaning playing those snare drum notes quieter, keeping the stick height lower, giving us a real kind of feel and a real nice change in dynamics between the backbeat, the main snare drums on 2 and 4, and these additional snare drum notes, really giving it this nice kind of almost shaker kind of feel. We also added the phrase that's on beat 2 to beat 4. You can see here in beat 2, we now have that same phrase in beat 4. So you can now see as well on beat 4, we've added the same phrase as beat 2. Again, with a ghost note with the brackets. The only difference is now we've also added a hi-hat lift on the and of 3. Really, really common placement of where we're going to put this hi-hat. Nicely, it comes in nicely before the last snare drum or the last backbeat of the bar. That will sound slowly like this. Simple additions, but really makes this groove pop, especially just the main dynamics in the left hand. That's a real big game changer. Rather than having this kind of flat rate dynamic of snare drums all being the same level, it kind of just sounds like a bit of a wall of noise. So instantly we've seasoned this groove. Let's hear it to a track. And in this example, I'm playing to just a pop tune, using the dynamics. The hi-hat lift really cuts through. Check it out. So variation 2, similar to variation 1, we're still keeping the same 2 bass drum notes at the start as we did in the other example. If we see here, we're keeping the same 2 bass drum notes, except the 2 snare drum notes we originally ghosted are now going up to the closed hi-hat. And we're putting an additional bass drum every other bar. So you can see here now, it's a 2-bar phrase. So all we're doing on the second bar is adding that bass drum on the and of 4. This just gives it a bit more melody and doesn't make it so repetitive. So we get this. Boom, boom, cat, boom, cat, boom, boom, cat, boom, cat, boom, 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 cat. So getting 3 bass drums in a row at one point. So let's hear how this is going to sound nice and slowly. And then we'll hear it again to another tune, another track, hearing it in context. So slowly first, breaking it down. Here we go. So now, let's see it in a musical context. A pop kind of vibe again, slow tempo. See how it sounds? In variation 3, we're going to take the original idea and those 2 additional snare drums that you can see on beats 2 and 3, on the A of beat 2 and the E of beat 3, we're going to move those down to the bass drum this time. Previously we've ghosted them, we've put them on the closed hi-hat, and now they're going to move south and go to the bass drum. Let's hear it. So there we've heard it in a slow example. Obviously this will work at loads of different tempos, but commonly you hear it around the slower to mid-range tempos. So let's hear this in a musical context and see how the hands are freed up now just to lay the backbeat down on beats 2 and 4, and then the bass drums have the main sort of musical melody, if you like, and how those 16th note bass drums fill in the gaps of our 8th notes. So the ones that aren't played with the hi-hats, again on the A of 2 and the E of 3. Here we go. Variation 4, we're now going to look at this in a 2-bar phrase. And in the first bar, we're going to move the snare drum that lives on beat 4. Let's have a look at the notation. On beat 4 is now going to be on the and of beat 4. So it's going to cross one hi-hat note. So we call this displacing the snare drum. So the backbeat has now moved across on the 8th note grid to the and. So this is really common in funk. funk, drum and bass. Think of songs like Cold Sweat by James Brown. You hear this a lot. That's the kind of basic premise of that groove. This displaced backbeat, this question and answer. So in the first bar, you can see the snare drum is on the and of 4. And then in the second bar, the first bass drum is pushed across as well to the and of 1. So this helps the groove resolve. Other than that, everything is in the same place as it was in the original example. So let's hear it slowly. The other slight variation is, on the end of the second bar, I put a hi-hat lift on the and of 4. So we have bombs, cat, bombs, cat, boom, cat, boom, cat. So you can see now there is the hi-hat lift on the and of 4. This is a really cool way of using this groove. If you've never displaced a snare drum before, and that's new to you as well, this is a really cool way of kind of dipping your toe into the water. Trying to listen to, like I say, Cold Sweat by James Brown is a common phrase you'd hear in also faster stuff like drum and bass. So I always say to my students, if you don't have any drum and bass kind of repertoire, just turn up the speed of your funk stuff. A lot of the time there's some real similarities between those two styles in, well, muscle memory and mechanics anyway. So let's hear it to a funk backing track and see how it syncs up with a displaced snare drum in variation 4. Final variation. This variation is going to be again based around orchestration. We're moving our dominant hand onto the floor tom rather than playing it on the hi-hat, and then the left hand is moving onto the high tom. So let's break this down. We have some similarities in the previous 4 examples here. Beat 1, we have the 2 bass drums. So let's look at the notation. So we have 1 and, so 2 bass drums with the right hand on the floor tom. Then, keeping that right hand on the floor tom throughout this whole 1 bar phrase, we then have the out of 2, you can see moves to the bass drum. And then beat 3, we still have the 3E and phrase played between the floor tom snare drum with the bass drum in the same place as previously on the and of 3. And then, like we did in the previous examples, on beat 4, we've added the additional snare drum on the A of beat 4. So now you can see it broken down, real slow. The only difference that I think that can be sometimes challenging at first, if you've never played it like this before, this kind of groove, is that we're sort of combining, like I said, a lot of the elements of the previous examples. This is really common in grooves like By the Way by Red Hot Chili Peppers. Chad Smith plays pretty much this kind of groove throughout the chorus. Sorry, the verse. And it gives you this monstrous kind of chaos. It's a really cool groove, but again, based off such a simple idea. So let's hear it in a musical context, and then that's our 5 examples. Here we go. So there we have it, guys. 5 cool variations on a simple idea you probably know how to play already. If you haven't heard that original groove before, you have a new groove to your groove repertoire. It's important to also, when you're playing your favorite grooves or stuff that you've heard your favorite drummers play, be able to recycle them with these simple additions, whether it's orchestration, so moving the notes around the kit like we discussed, addition and subtraction of notes. Obviously in this case we were doing mostly addition of notes with extra snare drum here, a hi-hat lift there. Seasoning with dynamics, so ghost notes on the snare drums. Really cool way of really getting some musical mileage out of an idea you've heard countless times, played countless times, but trying to get your arms around it and have some real kind of ownership over it. So there you go, simple idea, 5 variations. Happy practicing, stay well, and we'll see you soon.